She was the golden child, and I was just her forgotten sister until the day I walked down the aisle and finally my moment of revenge arrived. If one day you realize that your entire life has been nothing more than a faint shadow behind someone else, what would you do? I, Emily Parker, grew up inside that shadow, the shadow named Samantha Parker. With every breath I took, I watched myself being pushed aside to make way for the family's golden child. For years, I stayed silent, endured, believing that someday things would change. But the harsh truth is, those who are used to stepping on others will never stop unless you are the one who forces them to their knees. And that moment, the day I reclaimed justice for myself, began at what was supposed to be the most sacred event of my life, my wedding day. I never truly had a real birthday. As a child, every birthday cake placed before me was rich, dark chocolated, the flavor I despised with every fiber of my being. But Samantha loved it. And as an unspoken rule in the Parker household, Samantha's preferences were treated as absolute truth. When I dared to protest, my mother, Linda Parker, would merely chuckle and say, "Your sister likes it, don't be selfish." I learned to stay silent from those joyless birthdays. I learned to swallow my anger every time my father, Robert Parker, proudly boasted to the neighbors about one of Samantha's trivial awards, while my academic achievements were met with little more than a dismissive nod. Every celebration, every holiday revolved around Samantha. I wanted to go to the park. Samantha preferred the mall. I wanted to watch an animated movie. Samantha demanded a romance film. And of course, the final decision always catered to her wishes. Gradually, I came to understand a painful truth. I wasn't the cherished child. I was merely the faded backdrop against which my sister shone. There were nights I curled up in my tiny bedroom. If my childhood cast me as a shadow, then my teenage years turned me into a true punching bag. When I entered high school, Emily Parker began to gain attention for my academic achievements and friendly nature. For the first time, I experienced what it meant to have real friends. But Samantha, my younger sister, couldn't stand it. When she realized she was being left behind, Samantha started a sick game, systematically destroying every relationship I built. Friends who once laughed with me suddenly grew distant without explanation. Those I trusted most whispered cruel lies behind my back. I pieced together the truth from fragmented conversations. Samantha had spread vicious rumors, accusing me of speaking ill of them, claiming I was unworthy of genuine friendship. When I tried to fight back, when I presented the truth, my parents, Robert and Linda Mealy, shook their heads coldly. You should learn to be more like Samantha, nurturing, selfless, and focused on family unity instead of causing division. I, the victim, was cast as the villain. Lonely and humiliated, I withdrew from all friendships, clinging only to the rare family gatherings with distant cousins, the few who refused to believe Samantha's poisonous tales. Inside me, a fire smoldered, the fire of resentment, the fire of isolation, and the fire of a vow that one day I would reclaim everything that had been stolen from me. Young love for others, it's a sweet memory. For me, it was nothing but a series of knives to the back. When I Emily Parker-entered my first relationship, I cautiously kept it hidden from Samantha and our parents. But secrets never stay buried for long. And as an unchanging law in my life, once Samantha found out, everything began to crumble. After just a few visits, she showed up wearing a skimpy dress, giggling coyly in front of my boyfriend. She twirled her hair, let out innocent little laughs, and whispered that Emily is too childish, while she was so much more mature. My boyfriend, only 17 at the time, immediately rejected her and rushed to find me. But before the truth had a chance to come to light, Samantha struck first. She burst into our home, sobbing in front of Robert and Linda Parker, accusing my boyfriend of trying to harass her, claiming she had kept quiet out of dignity and pride. And as always, Robert and Linda didn't need proof. They believed Samantha instantly. They forbade me from seeing him again, scolding me for being naive and having poor judgment. My boyfriend, the only person who had ever looked at me with warmth, vanished from my life under a suffocating cloud of injustice and pain. I thought I had learned my bitter lesson, but history repeated itself. A new love, another lurking Samantha, another fabricated accusation, another cold verdict from the people I still, somehow, could not bring myself to abandon. Gradually, I stopped bringing anyone home. I stopped believing in love. I stopped believing that anyone could genuinely want to step into this dark, trap-laden world of mine. Inside me, where love might have once bloomed, there was only a freezing void. Meanwhile, Samantha grew up basking in applause, in adoring praise, in the proud glances of our parents, completely oblivious, or perhaps indifferent, to the deep, bleeding wounds she left on me, wounds that never truly heal. I, Emily Parker-Once, believed that if I just tried hard enough, if I worked harder than anyone else, I could escape the invisible prison called family. I studied like a mad woman. While Samantha floated from party to event, I buried myself in textbooks under the dim glow of a desk lamp. When Samantha was praised for her brilliant B grades, I quietly stacked my certificates of straight A's into a dusty drawer. One at home even glanced at them. I endured it all because I believed scholarships, college, a ticket out of here, that would be the true victory. But as that day drew near, the fragile hope within me was crushed by just a few words from my mother, Linda Parker. Emily, you know how it is. We've already spent so much on Samantha. Money isn't endless. It would be better if you worked for a while. After Samantha graduates, we'll reconsider. Each word cut through me like a blade slicing into flesh. I managed to ask, "What about scholarships? Student loans?" Linda smiled sweetly, cruelly. "Loans? With your impulsive nature? We need to see which schools are really worth it first." Worth it? Had 18 years of struggling in the shadows not been enough to make me worth it? I turned to my father, Robert Parker, hoping for even a flicker of sympathy, but he just avoided my gaze and sighed, as if I were the burden weighing them down. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply nodded and said, "I understand. Thank you, Mom and Dad." Linda looked stunned. Maybe she had expected sobbing, an outburst, a scene she could later use to justify abandoning me. But I refused to give them that satisfaction. That night, I curled up in the darkness, listening to Samantha's giggles through the thin walls. The fire inside me no longer blazed uncontrollably. It shrank into a slow-burning ember, silent, steady, waiting for the right moment to consume everything. In that moment, I swore. If this world would not give me justice, I would take it with my own hands. Even if I had to burn down the past, burn down the bloodline itself. Amid those dark, endless days, Jason Miller appeared not as a saving light, but as a hidden fire, smouldering, dangerous. Jason wasn't like me, calm and submissive. He was a fierce headwind, sharp, relentless, unafraid to expose the lies I had long been conditioned to quietly endure. The day Jason proposed, I was nearly paralyzed with fear. I loved him, but I was terrified that my cruel, poisoned world would consume the purest thing that had ever happened to me. Jason simply tightened his grip on my hand, his gaze steady, as if he could see all the wounds I had tried so desperately to hide. "You don't have to be strong alone anymore, Emily. Let me carry it with you." When we began planning our wedding, I hesitantly suggested hosting it back in my hometown, where most of my family still lived. Jason understood immediately without me having to say a word. This would be the final battle. And as if fate itself wanted to test me one last time, Robert, Linda, and Samantha Parker wasted no time in hatching another sick scheme. They proposed that Samantha wear a wedding dress and walk down the aisle ahead of me as a compensation for the fact that I was getting married first. Jason heard everything with a small recorder hidden in his jacket pocket. He didn't get angry, he didn't shout. He simply smiled a cold, cutting smile and said, "We'll let them dig their own graves." And so we began to plan. Not childish tit-for-tat games, not meaningless screaming matches. We would give them exactly what they had made me endure my entire life: public humiliation, exposure under the cold, unforgiving light of truth. Jason convinced my parents that we agreed to their plan. He played the role of the obedient, spineless son-in-law. He let them gloat, grow arrogant, and step deeper and deeper into the trap we had set. We hired security. We kept every message, every piece of evidence completely off digital record speaking, only in person, so no trail could be traced back. We let them believe they had won until the final moment. I, Emily Parker's forgotten daughter, the child who endured in silence, was ready to reclaim everything on the most sacred day of my life, ready to turn my wedding into the most perfect revenge the Parker family had ever witnessed. The big day arrived. My heart, Emily Parker's heart, pounded wildly in my chest, not from the excitement of becoming Jason Miller's wife, but because today, every wound I had carried for 25 years would finally be avenged, brought into the light for all to see. The ceremony was beautifully prepared, rows of chairs lined up perfectly, warm light bathing each pristine white flower. The Parker family sat proudly in the front row, smug and beaming, oblivious to the humiliation just a few breaths away. According to their plan, Samantha would wear a wedding dress and walk down the aisle before me, stealing the moment that should have been mine. According to our real plan, she would never even step through that door. As the opening music played, all heads turned expectantly toward the back of the aisle. But instead of Samantha, I stepped forward in a pure white gown, my arm linked with Jason's, my gaze fierce and proud, a silent declaration to the world. I caught my father Robert Parker's stunned expression, the way his eyes darted to the entrance, searching for Samanthathan, the way he fumbled for his phone, whispering frantically into it. Outside, Samantha Parker, dressed ridiculously in her wedding gown, was screaming and struggling against a burly security guard we had hired. "This is my wedding!" Samantha shrieked, her voice sharp and desperate. The guard simply shook his head coldly. "Sorry, miss, you're not on the guest list." Robert and Linda rushed outside, bargaining, threatening, pleading, but it was no use. Curious guests began to follow them, and soon the whispering spread like wildfire. Inside the hall, the guests who remained turned their curious eyes toward Meet the bride, abandoned by her own parents on her wedding day. I didn't cry. I didn't crumble. I simply smiled, proudly, defiantly. A close friend spoke up loudly, almost as if by accident. Unbelievable. Her own parents tried to sabotage their daughter's wedding just to cater to the younger sister. The air turned suffocating. The truth, like a cold, sharp blade, sliced through the mask the Parker family had worn for so long. Robert, Linda, and Samantha were left exposed, surrounded by the scornful stares of friends, relatives, and acquaintances. No one stood by them. No one reached out to save them. They lost everything: honor, trust, and the power they once held over me. I, Emily Parker, had finally reclaimed my day. And for the first time in my life, I walked forward with no shadow lingering behind me. After that day, I, Emily Parker, knew everything had changed. The first phone calls came in that very night, our wedding night. Familiar numbers, familiar voices screaming, accusing, sobbing hysterically. I didn't answer. Jason Miller sat beside me, his hand tightly holding mine, his gaze calm but unwavering. "We're not looking back." I nodded. For the first time in my life, I was no longer the trembling girl, paralyzed by my family's rage. The messages poured in from Robert, from Linda, from Samantha. Their words were even more venomous than anything I had endured growing up. Samantha, in her madness, even hinted that Jason would betray me, claiming that she was the one he truly loved. Jason simply sneered, compiled all the messages into a thick dossier, and sent it to the extended family group where aunts, uncles, and cousins who had witnessed everything at the wedding were quietly seething with outrage. There was no pity left for Robert, Linda, or Samantha. The Parker family found themselves isolated, whispered about at every gathering, every casual exchange. Samantha, once adored like a queen, became a pitiful, mocked figure in everyone's eyes. I still heard news about them, sometimes passed along by distant relatives who still respected me. Samantha lost her job after a minor scandal at her workplace. Robert and Linda, their reputation in shambles, gradually withdrew from social life. I didn't feel triumphant. Only a deep, profound sense of relief filled my soul. All my life, I had searched for an answer to one question. Why wasn't I loved? But now I understood. Some questions don't need answers. Some wounds don't need to be healed with forgiveness for those who inflicted them. They simply need to be cut away. And I had done it. Beside me, Jason Millerther, man who didn't just love me, but believed in my worth, held my hand and led me forward, stepping over the wreckage of the past. And at the end of that road, for the first time in my life, I was truly free. No longer a shadow, no longer living by someone else's definition. Only me and the wide open days ahead,